Thank you for welcoming me once again into your homes. A beautiful Sunday morning I know awaits you. And thank you for giving God this time of your morning and of your life. Even if you schedule another day to listen to this message, I pray that God gives you divine inspiration and gives you what you need to survive this period in our lives. As we racing towards the festive season, I ask you, please, and urge you not to let your guard down, to be conscious at all times about everything that you do, and also keep one eye, if not both, on the signs that await us. There are many who are curious as to where we are in the projection of the coming of the Lord, and we are in this period where lawlessness is going to begin. Extreme lawlessness. And we see the transition that first took place in the West with the new government in place, a democratic government to carry out the wishes of the majority of the people, which mainly centers around total freedom. Do as thou wilt. A slogan that captures the Satanic Bible. Now, you'll notice that as that transition takes place, the next big event that we will await is for the crumbling of the more right-winged, principled sort of governments. You'll await the fall of the Russian Empire, the resignation of Putin, and a new government taking over there. You'll find that second beast must fall in order for the first beast, the lawlessness one, to take full and total control of the world. So once that part of the world starts to crumble, so will the rest of it. And then we'll wait for that huge event that we've been waiting for since the prophecy has been made in the Bible, and that is where Israel is surrounded by its enemies. And at that moment will be the final trumpet sound, and once again we shall get ready. However, we don't even know what tomorrow holds, so for now we've got to keep both eyes on the Lord Jesus Christ and make sure we stray not from His purpose. I'm going to deliver to you a more dramatic and shocking revelations this week that perhaps would awaken you to the reality of the times that we live in and the forces that we face as we battle on this earth. I'm going to take you to a story that is captured in the Bible and also in a book that we haven't probably been in contact with because it's not in the Bible. It's one of the hidden texts of the Old Testament that used to be in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and that was the Ascension of Isaiah. This book encapsulates how Isaiah was taken up and the events that preceded that taking up. And in 2 Kings chapter 21, we'll read a story there. It's concerning the king Hezekiah. He was a good king. He came from noble background. His son was the problem. And this prophecy that we're going to now encounter is dealing with his son. His son's name was Manasseh, a man that turned law into lawlessness. Now, the reason why I am choosing this particular piece of scripture is because it is very much a parallel to what is going to happen to us. It is also almost like a premonition of what is going to happen to us when Jesus comes and we all taken up into the air to be with Him. It's the same kind of thing, the things that were happening on the ground, the lawlessness that was erupting, the same kind of thing while Isaiah was in hiding from the attack of Manasseh. God spared him the wrath of Manasseh, because God lifted him up and took him away. In the very same way, God is going to spare us from the tribulations of this lawlessness so that we also can be taken up. It is sort of a parallel, and I'm going to draw that parallel in a moment. Hezekiah was in the 26th year of his reign as king. He was the 13th king of Judah. Now, he wasn't the king of the entire Israel. At that time, Judah had its own king, and Hezekiah was the king of Judah. His mother's father, Zechariah, was a prophet, a minor prophet in the Old Testament. And his father was King Ahaz. So he came from noble background. And so he did everything that was good in the sight of the Lord. He followed the order of God. And then he called his son Manasseh, when Manasseh was just about 9 years old, and he called Isaiah, the prophet of Judah, into a meeting. And he called Isaiah's son in that meeting. And he spoke about the visions and dreams that he had about what is going to take place in these days that you and I are going to live in, and what is going to unfold in the history of Israel. And so the prophecy about what we're going through now is not only restricted to the things that we see in the Bible, also in the hidden texts, the Apocrypha. And the Ascension of Isaiah is one of those books in which a king, Hezekiah, had a vision of the end times. Now, while we speaking of this, 10 years before that, he was very sick, Hezekiah the king. And in that sickness, God showed him visions of a lot of things that are going to take place. And so 10 years after that, when he was well enough and his son was old enough, he called his son together with the prophet and the prophet's son, and he had a meeting with them. And he says, the purpose of this meeting is to share with you the visions that I have, so that my son can hear firsthand about what God is planning and what God is about, and the visions that I have. I thought I'd share this information with my son, Manasseh, in front of you, the prophet, so you can confirm to my son the visions that I had, and so that when I'm gone, he honors God just like how I honor God. So we'll take our first reading from 2 Kings chapter 21. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. Before we can continue that reading, now that we know who Manasseh is and what he became, I want to tell you about what the ascension of Isaiah was about. In verse 5, it is written, "And he delivered unto him the written words of Samnas the scribe had written, and also those which Isaiah the son of Amos had given to him, and also the prophets, that they might write and store up with him what he himself had seen in the king's house regarding the judgment of the angels and the destruction of this world, and regarding the garments of the saints and their going forth, and regarding their transformation and the persecution and ascension of the beloved." Isaiah said to Hezekiah the king, but not in the presence of Manasseh, only did he say unto him, "As the Lord liveth, and the Spirit which speaketh in me liveth, all these commands and these words will be made of none effect by Manasseh thy son. And through the agency of his hands I will depart mid the torture of my body." Let's stop there for a moment. I'm going to set you the picture that was taking place. So I mentioned to you that King Hezekiah called Isaiah, his son, and Manasseh, and all that the scribes have written about the end times, about God, all that Isaiah wrote and prophesied about God and the end times, and the other prophets. They wrote everything down. And so Hezekiah had all this information written down, and on top of that, he was going to share with his son all the experiences and visions that he had. And including when we are going to be resurrected and how our body is going to be transformed. That we won't have flesh anymore. We'll be light that cannot be tortured or persecuted, or we cannot feel pain. It's just light. And so all this information was given to Isaiah or to Hezekiah, and he says, if I tell my son this, I know he will continue in my tradition to serve God. And then Isaiah called him one side without Manasseh, and Isaiah said to him, I'm going to tell you something very disappointing now, King. Your son is not going to listen. This thing that we're telling him is going to be a waste of our time. God shows me that these people, this man, is going to be misled, and he's going to cause corruption and destruction and lawlessness. He's going to be a menace of a man. And he's going to be the agent. You remember we read the word agency last week. The ability of living creatures to alter their environment and themselves with the purpose to suit an agenda. This Manasseh of yours is going to be controlled. He's going to act as an agent to suit the purpose of the lawless one. And he's going to wreck Israel. I'm very sorry to tell you this, king. He goes on in verse 8. Isaiah tells King Hezekiah, and Samael, that's a very important name I'm going to share with you in a moment. Samael Malchira will serve Manasseh and execute all his desire. And he will become a follower of Beliar rather than me. And many in Jerusalem and in Judea he will cause to abandon the true faith, and Beliar will dwell in Manasseh, and by his hands I shall be sawn asunder. Now wait a minute here. Isaiah tells the king Hezekiah, he says, listen, your son Manasseh, the one that's 9 years old now, he's going to become king in 3 years when he's 12. And he's going to have an assistant there. His assistant's name is Samael. But Samael is also an agent of Beliar. Now I want you to remember that name, Beliar. It's a very important name. And Beliar is going to live in Manasseh. Wow. In other words, Beliar is a demon, and that demon is going to live inside your son, Manasseh. And by his hands, the agent of Beliar, Manasseh is going to be an agent of Beliar, and by his hands I shall be sawn asunder. He says, this Manasseh is going to torment me. He's going to want to come after me. I'm going to be a magnet to him to chase after me. That's going to be his purpose, is to get me. And true to his word, when he became king, he did just that. He chased Isaiah to kill him. And before he can complete this job, God removed him and took him away. Now, I'm going to read to you 2 Kings chapter 21 verse 1 to 6 before I teach you some other words and names. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, for he built the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed. He raised up altars for Baal and made a wooden image as Ahab king of Israel had done. And he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. He also built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. And he built altars for all the host of heaven, that's fallen angels, in 2 courts of the house of the Lord. And he also made his son pass through the fire, practicing soothsaying, used witchcraft, consulted spiritists and medium. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord. So this Manasseh was a menace. And his father Hezekiah or Hezekiah, those names are intermixed. They're the same name, but Hebrews have different interpretations. Hezekiah, it's the same person. And that was his father who did so much good, and this guy came and turned it upside down. But he didn't do it on his own. He was controlled. He was an agent of Beliar. Now I'm going to give you the definition of these 2 words or the meanings. Belial or Beliar, it's the same Hebrew word as well. There's many derivations of that Hebrew word, but it's the same name, Beliar. Beliar is a Hebrew word used to characterize the wicked or worthless. The etymology of the word is often understood as lacking worth from the 2 common words, beli, without, and ya'al, to be of value. In other words, worthless. So this demon had a name that literally meant worthless. Beliar or Belial. You'll see this word mentioned by Jesus, Apostle Paul, when he was talking in 2 Corinthians 6:15. And he said, and what accord has Christ with Belial? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? So he is saying, the believers have worth. They should be associated with God. They have no association with Belial, who is worthless. The next name I'm going to teach you is Samael. I read that to you earlier on to tell you to take special note of it. Samael Machira will serve Manasseh. That's what I read to you. So Isaiah prophesied that this man, Samael Malchira, is going to serve Manasseh under the control of Beliar. Now the word Samael is a Hebrew word, and you'll see the spelling is what we just read, Samael. It means venom of God, poison of God, blindness of God. In Arabic, a figure who is the accuser, ha-Satan, seducer and destroyer. So this man called Samael Malchira, working together with Belial, is going to corrupt Manasseh, so much so that he turns Jerusalem, he turns Judah into a lawless society. Similar to the time that we're going to be coming up right now in our lives. We're at that juncture. The ascension of Isaiah continues. In verse 11, and Isaiah said unto him, the counsel of Samael against Manasseh is consummated, naught will avail thee. In other words, he's saying, Samael, this poison of God, this rebellious being, this accuser, this Satan, this blindness of God, this person Samael, which is possibly a spirit, he has already consummated with your son Manasseh. At the age of 9, Manasseh was already in fellowship with Samael. His heart was already poisoned with, he was possessed, in other words, with Samael. And he says, anything that you talk to your son about God, even if you warn him about the things to come, it will be naught. Because that relationship between him and the devil has already been consummated. So he's now telling Hezekiah or Hezekiah that your son is a golem. And nothing you say to him is going to change him. His purpose is to be used as an agent to cause corruption and lawlessness and to be against God. Nothing you say is going to change that. And Hezekiah, he wanted to just murder his son right there and then, because he knew what the prophet was saying was going to come to pass. Well, in fact, it all started just 3 years after that. When he was 12 years old, Manasseh started this reign under the command of Samael and Beliar. This is not where the story of Belial ends. I want to continue because it's a very important segment of understanding. In the Gospel of Bartholomew, it's called the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is another gospel that we don't have privy to because it's not in our Bible. But this is the apostle that spoke about the visions that he had and the conversations he had with Jesus Christ after he died. He was one of the original 12 apostles that spent years with Jesus as one of his closest confidants. Little is known about Bartholomew, but this he did write in verse 6. And Bartholomew said, Lord, when thou wentest to be hanged upon the cross, I followed thee afar off, and saw thee hung upon the cross, and the angels coming down from heaven and worshipping thee. And when there came darkness, I beheld and I saw thee, that thou wast vanished away from the cross. And I heard only a voice in the parts under the earth, and a great wailing and gnashing of teeth on a sudden. Tell me, Lord, whither wentest thou from the cross? In other words, where did you go from that cross when I saw you disappeared? And Jesus answered and said, Blessed art thou, Bartholomew, my beloved, because thou sawest this mystery. And now will I tell thee all things whatsoever thou askest me. For when I vanished away from the cross, then I went down into Hades, that I might bring up Adam and all them that were with him, according to the supplication of Michael the archangel. Then Bartholomew said, Lord, what was the voice which was heard? Jesus said unto him, Hades said unto Beliar, As I perceive, a God cometh hither. And the angels cried unto the powers, saying, Remove your gates, ye princes, remove the everlasting doors, for behold, the King of glory cometh down. Hades said, Who is the King of glory that cometh down from heaven unto us? Verse 13, And when I had descended 500 steps, Hades was troubled, saying, I hear the breathing of the Most High. I cannot endure it. He cometh with great fragrance, and I cannot bear it. Wow, what a story. Bartholomew said, Lord, when I looked at you from a distance hanging on the tree, on that cross, for a moment I saw you disappear, and then I heard sounds from underground. What was that? Jesus says, wow, it's amazing that you are blessed because you saw that mystery. But I'm going to tell you everything you want to know. And he says, the sounds that you heard was when Hades was asking Beliar. Beliar is a god in charge of the earth and its corruption. He was second in charge to Lucifer, Beliar. And Hades, who is the god of the underworld, controlling the gates of hell, he's asking, I can hear a rumbling on the top, Beliar. Can you, Hades is asking Beliar, what is that I'm hearing? And Beliar is denying it. He's saying, what are you talking about? What king of majesty is coming down here? And Hades says, wait a minute. I can hear that sound. You're lying to me, Beliar. What a name he's got to, Beliar. And so Beliar kept quiet for a moment, and then Jesus says, when I took 500 steps down, on my 500th step, he could smell my fragrance. He says, to Hades. Hades says to Beliar, I can't take this anymore. The King of Glory is here. And the gates had to open. And Jesus came in and he surrounded and he took up all his saints that had died before. And Hades couldn't hold them anymore. So that's what transpired. Now let us look at the more contemporary things that are taking place or have taken place in recent years. When I say recent, I mean in the last 100 years. There is a person in 1877 who was born. His name was Edgar Cayce. He was an American clairvoyant who claimed that he could uniquely channel himself to a higher self. Cayce's channeling sessions happened in a trance state. Remember, I taught you about this trance state. When you go into a trance, you don't know what's happening. He says he can go into the trance state, and early days he used to use his wife and others to help him to get there. But later, as he got experienced, he could get there himself. In this trance state, he says that he could prophesy. In these sessions, he was able to answer questions about the universe, about God, about the spirits, and answers will come while he's in this trance state. And he was revered. He answered questions regarding healing, reincarnation, dreams, the afterlife, the past life, nutrition, Atlantis, and future events. This man was gifted, but here's the thing that interests me most. He was a devout Christian and a Sunday school teacher. He believed that the mind was a timeless thing. It was connected. He founded a non-profit organization, the Association of Research and Enlightenment. It's still active today. He has opened a hospital which has its headquarters in Virginia today, and he's in about 70 countries around the world. The founder of this movement, and you know who he believed in? He trusted in Beliar, the same demon god that was spoken of even in the time of Isaiah, then in the time of Jesus. Jesus himself used this name to describe his encounter in hell when he was going down to Hades to remove his saints. We're going to go a little further with this. There is a book that was originated in the mid-17th century. It was constructed with writings that were done centuries before that. This book was called The Lesser Key of Solomon, or a book of demons and the office that they held. In other words, demons and what they were in charge of. And one of those demons were called Belial. And this is the description in that book about Belial. It is also called Belhor, Belial, Beliar, Belial, or Belil. Is listed as the 68th spirit of the Lesser Key of Solomon. He is a king of hell with 80 legions of demons and 50 legions of spirits under his command. He was created as the first after Lucifer. He has the power to distribute senatorships and gives excellent familiars. He must be present with offerings, sacrifices, and gifts, or else he will not give true answers to demands. This is the description in a more occultic book about who Belial is. There's two words in that reading that I want to familiarize yourself with, and one is the word senatorships. Senatorships means Belial is the one who can give you positions of power, presidencies, CEOships. He can give you positions of influence. Beliar holds the key to giving his people positions in government, in private practice, in institutions, in sporting events. He elevates certain people that he can control, that can act as his agent to those positions. Has it not amazed you that even in your life, at your workplace, there are people who are totally immoral that have risen to the heights of the company, and you that may be honest, that may be hardworking, that may be decent enough and committed enough to rise, you never get to that position that you feel you deserve. Because those positions of senatorships are reserved for the followers of Beliar. Whether they know it or they don't know it, if they are controlled to work as his agent in causing chaos, in causing jealousy and hatred, in causing favoritism and nepotism, if they are in doing his bidding to frustrate you, he elevates them because he has control. The world belongs to Satan. Positions of influence belong to Satan. And so you must be also aware that this is how Belial operates. So senatorships, he gives powers of office to have control. The second thing he does, he gives you excellent familiars. We read that just now. Excellent familiars. That means he gives and assigns a demon to people who practice things like witchcraft. Now, when you think of witchcraft, you think of a man sitting with bones, or you think of man sitting with something in a very remote, dark place. No, witches are even people who stand on pulpits, but they disguise themselves as angels of light. He gives and assigns demons to carry out the wishes of certain people in these senator positions, that sometimes even when they do wrong, they can get away with it. Because these demons that are assigned to them are very powerful, excellent. The word used is excellent familiars. Demons of excellence carry out the wishes of these people who have been given senatorships by Beliar. So you must look at the picture of the world, and I want you to see Beliar actively involved. Not only does that happen in this sort of realm, but he gives excellent familiars to witch doctors, people who practice magic arts, all this herbery, all these things. He gives them excellent familiars to carry out their duty. This Beliar is very much at work in our lives. The book is divided into 5 sections. One of them is called the Ars Goetia, Arsgoetia, one of those sections. And in that one section, he talks of Belial, his power to award positions and powers. That's where this description comes from. The next time we hear of Belial in the more contemporary times is in 1904. Alistair Crowley is a well-known, notorious person who started the Satanic movement and gave momentum to it, to how we know it now. He wrote his own Goetia, Goetia. He wrote his own. And his primary line that encapsulates this whole book, Goetia, is entitled, "Do as thy wilt." The freedom to do anything you desire, even if it hurts somebody, it's fine. In other words, the direct opposite of God. He called this the law of Thelema. Thelema was a goddess, but it all started when his wife used to get possessed. His wife's name was Rose. And she used to go into this trance. And there's a goddess or god by the name of Aiwas that spoke through her to him and told him that that god was Thelema. And so the Thelemites began their teaching. The Thelemites, in fact, are the ones that influence and are influenced by many Western and Eastern religions. The Kabbalah, the people you find, some musicians and big artists and all these people you see on TV, they wear a red string. That it's part of the Thelematic belief and the worship of that kind of God. And so this man used that as a platform for Satan worship. And you know, the irony is that he studied in the Trinity College in the United Kingdom. He came out of a Christian background. That's a food for thought. The next time we see Belial show up on a world stage is when self-confessed murderer Anton LaVey, Satan worshipper, the writer of the Satanic Bible, he had a special book called the Book of Belial. He gave special mention to Belial. In fact, in the Satanic Bible, he writes there how he began to worship Satan. And the things that are going to come out, things that are there are shocking, but the things I'm going to bring to you should awaken you. And he said that Anton LaVey began the road to high priesthood of the Church of Satan when he was 16 years old and an organ player in a carnival. And this is what he says. On Saturday night, I would see men lusting after half-naked girls dancing at the carnival. And on Sunday morning, when I was playing the organ for tent show evangelists, at the other end of the carnival lot, I would see these same men sitting in the pews with their wives and children, asking God to forgive them and purge them of carnal desires. And the next Saturday night, they'd be back at the carnival or some other place of indulgence. I knew then that the Christian church thrives on hypocrisy and that man's carnal nature will out. This set this man, who was an organ player in a church gathering, turned his perceptions around and allowed Belial to take center stage. From that time, early in his life, his path was clear. LaVey shaved his head in the tradition of ancient executioners and announced the formation of the Church of Satan. He had seen the need for a church that would recapture man's body and his carnal desires as objects of celebration. In other words, he's saying, I can see the hypocrisy. He says, I want to create a church where people don't have to be hypocrites. They can just come and be who they are. Do as thou wilt. This is what he quotes in the Satanic Bible. He says, since worship of fleshly things produce pleasure, there would be then a temple of glorious indulgence. In other words, he's saying, you can't stay in the church and be hypocrite. You might as well go to another church where you can indulge this body and celebrate it. In the Satanic Bible, The 9 satanic statements, I won't read you all 9, but just some that might impact your thinking. He says, number 1, Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Number 2, Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. Number 5, Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. 7, Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. You know that thing you learned in school about we came from animals? There's it in the Satanic Bible. He's calling you and I just another animal with superior intellect. That's what Satan thinks of you. That's why I read to you earlier times in scriptures about Adam and Eve. When God wanted Lucifer to bow to man, he says that's just an animal. He treats you and thinks of you as a low-standing creature. Number 9, he says, Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years. That's an amazing statement. The book goes on to give some evidence of a new satanic age. And it's written, this is written in that Satanic Bible. And these are the things, I'm not going to read to you obviously the entire thing, but I'm going to read to you portions that might help you to see things clearer. This is what it says. The 7 deadly sins of the Christian church are greed, pride, envy, anger, gluttony, lust, and sloth. Satanism advocates indulging in each of these sins as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification. A Satanist knows there is nothing wrong with being greedy, as it only means that he wants more than he already has. Envy means to look with favor upon the possessions of others and to be desirous of obtaining similar things for oneself. Envy and greed are the motivating forces of ambition. Without ambition, a very little of any importance would be accomplished. Amazing. I'm going to stop there for a moment to discuss what Satan has used this man as an agent to write down. He says nothing wrong in being greedy. You must want more than you already have. Sometimes, listen carefully. The church of God, they want you to have more than enough. They want you to aspire to have an ambition to want more than enough. And those words that they use to inspire you is to cause envy. You know, sometimes it's important when we're listening to people speak to us, especially from pulpits, because they have an everlasting effect on your soul that lives forever. It's nice for you. Sister Nash was reminding me the other day that we take so much of time to think about, you know, we're gifted with that ability to think. God put it in us. I read to you that a few weeks ago. We decide what color nail polish we want to put, and we spend time thinking how it will match the shirt we're going to wear, or the skirt we're going to wear, or the shoes. We think and we research what haircut is going to suit us for the next season. There's so much of thought goes in, and there's nothing wrong with that, because we all don't want to look mad on the road. But maybe now and again it's okay if we wear 2 different color socks and walk, because it means that we don't give much thought to trivial things. But it's nice to think about these things. But we give so little time to think about some things that are glaringly obvious. When somebody tells you to want more than you have or you need, it's called greed. It's called ambition. Ambition for physical things. You got to see it just like it is. When you stir up envy in people, you are wanting them to have what other people have. Let me look at this for a moment. When somebody says to you, last week, there was a man who was down and out. He had his last 1,000 rand in the bank, and he gave it to the church. He sowed a seed, and 48 hours later, God turned it around for him, and he got 100,000 rand contract from somebody. You see, God gave him 100-fold, 1,000-fold return on his investment. Now, what does that do to the listener? You want the same thing as what happened to that man. So the motive, the purpose of telling you that is so that you desire to have the same outcome as that happened to someone else. And so that's going to inspire you to give also 1,000 rand or whatever you can afford, because you also are envious of what happened to that man. You want it to happen to you. It's called ambition through envy. And he says, Satan says, that's what I believe in. Anton LaVey says, that's what Satan believes in. That's what we Satanists believe in. That's why when Jesus performed a miracle, he told that man, shh, don't tell anybody. I don't want them to come to me because I can heal them. I don't want you to give because God can give you back. If you spend a moment thinking about that, you will see Satan coming out of some people who preach the gospel I'm talking about. And you know, the amazing thing is, I want you to start thinking. I'm going to try and get you to understand this, that's written in the same Satanic Bible. I'm going to summarize for you. It's not the exact words I'm using, but I'm going to summarize. He says in this Bible of theirs, Satanic Bible, he says when a pup grows up, it's called a dog. It's no longer a pup, it's called a dog. It transitions. He says when ice melts, it becomes water. So it's no more ice, it's water. He says when a Christian transcends to the other side, why do you keep calling it a Christian? He says, that's why I started the church. You might as well call it a Satanist. So as you and I start to think, we can see many Satanists behind the pulpit. And they've been going on and on carrying the work of BELIAR. I know I'm being a bit difficult and sometimes, but I want to zero in on the work of BELIAR. This is how he gets in and corrupts. He appeals to your physicalness, to the desire and gratification of the physical body. Let me give you another thing that he says. Gluttony is simply eating more than you need to keep yourself alive. When you have overeaten to the point of obesity, another sin comes in, which is pride. Will motivate you to regain an appearance that will renew your self-respect. Well, that doesn't need much explanation. You see, you can eat as much you want, then you start to want to slim down, and so that you can have people admire you again. And this is what it goes on to say. In the Satanic Bible, it says this: times have changed. Religious leaders no longer preach that all our natural actions are sinful. We no longer think sex is dirty, or that taking pride in ourselves is shameful, or that wanting something someone else has is vicious. Of course not. Times have changed. If you want proof of this, just look at how liberal churches have become. Why? They're practicing all the things that you preach. Satanists hear these and similar statements all the time, and they agree wholeheartedly. But if the world has changed so much, why continue to grasp at the threads of a dying faith? If many religions are denying their own scriptures because they are out of date and are preaching the philosophies of Satanism, why not call it by its rightful name, Satanism? certainly it will be far less hypocritical. If priests and ministers were to have used the devices to fill the churches 100 years ago that they use today, they would have been charged with heresy, called devils, oft times persecuted, but certainly excommunicated without hesitation. Past religions have always represented the spiritual nature of man with little or no concern for his carnal or mundane needs. They have considered this life but transitory, and the flesh merely a shell, physical pleasure trivial, and a pain worth preparing for the kingdom of God. Many churches with some of the largest congregations have the most hand-clapping, sensual music, also satanically inspired. After all, the devil has always had the best tunes. This is what he says. So the man who is acting as an agent of Satan to start this flow of Satanism in the end days, he is telling the church like it is. He's saying, if they were doing the things they're doing today, about how they're siphoning money and stealing and corrupting and liberal thinking, he says if it was happening long time, 100 years ago, he says they would have been kicked out of the church without question. He says, but now look at all these things that are taking place. They're appealing to the carnal nature of man. And that's why if they know, if you're going to attract somebody, you have to find out what are people attracted to. It's a law of democracy. Let me give you an example. If there's 100 people in this city, it's an example. And you have to find out, what do these people want? And if you know that they want money, and you preach money, 90 out of those 100 people, most of them will want the money, so they'll come there. And then there's a lot of competition, so you have to go beyond that. What else do they want? They want you to soothe their ego. In other words, feel good messages. Don't talk about hell and heaven and sin. Just feel good stuff. And so if you add the two, money and ego, people want to feel nice. They want to feel like they're somebody. They want to feel affluent. They feel associated with something successful. Your ego, you must preach, calm, with nice words. You must caress them, uplift them. They don't want to hear about the wrongs they're doing. You just have to make them feel nice and then preach about money and how wealth can improve you. All those things, if you hear that, if it's in a democratic place, you got 100 people, you get about 90 people out of that 100. And the small percentage who truly serve God will go somewhere else. And this is how the devil operates. This is Satanism, using democracy against us. Beliar, his purpose, I read to you 2 weeks ago, is to lead astray. His purpose is to persecute you. And he uses every means possible. He's alive today doing the same thing he did to Isaiah through Manasseh. You got your own Manasseh. There are a lot of them around. And I want you to be aware of them. I'm going to give you the last few things I'm going to share about the Satanic Bible. The 4 crowned princes of hell. First one is Satan. He's described as the adversary, opposite, accuser, lord of fire, the inferno, the south. Lucifer, bringer of light, enlightenment, the air, the morning star, the east. Then Belial. Belial in Hebrew means without a master, baseness. That means lacking of moral character of the earth, independence, and he is represented by the north. Then Leviathan, the serpent of the deeps, the sea, the west. So Belial is one of the top 4 ranks in charge on this planet, and he's got agents. He's got demons, he's got legions of them, and he puts them in powerful positions. He's got golems under his control. And listen to me, if you're a child of God and you truly want to serve God, he's got your number. And he makes them. You remember last week we were talking about how this how this white blood cell, it follows the germ and until it catches it. And this white blood cell has no brain. It has been purposed with a design to follow this germ, and it follows it and it swallows it up. This Belial is like a white blood cell. When it looks at the children of God, that's why sometimes you go to work, someone looks at you, they just hate you, but for no reason. When you go to shopping, maybe you're paying for an article, someone will be good to someone else, but when they look at you, they're like a blood boils. You can't understand it. People give you a harder time than they give normal people. And you think it's a coincidence. And you think, I don't know what's wrong with me. My school children don't play with me like how they play with other people. They don't relate. What must I do? Listen to me, you can do whatever you want. If Belial is controlled, his job is to make your life miserable. Is to destroy you. The thing is, you're going to have to realize what the Bible says in Ephesians 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Listen, these people are, Belial is in your home sometimes. He's in your neighborhood. He's in the supermarkets. Belial is in your workplaces. He is everywhere. He's got agents, and his job, it's like a purpose put into these people that sometimes they don't even know you from a bar of soap, but they just hate you. And you can't understand it. If you're a friend of the world and nobody, hates you or does anything wrong, me, I got a lot of friends, everybody likes me, then you might not be on the right side of the fence. But if you have natural hate from people that don't know you, you got to go on your knees and thank God, Lord, I'm on your side, because this world is controlled by the enemy. In the ascension of Isaiah chapter 2 verse 4, it says, and Manasseh turned aside his heart to serve Beliar. For the angel of lawlessness, who is the ruler of this world, is Beliar, whose name is Mantang Pogas. And witchcraft and magic increased, and divination and inauguration. That means telling of the signs of omens, and fornication and adultery and persecution of the righteous by Manasseh. When they are getting persecuted, God saved Isaiah. In the same way, when you start to get persecuted, God is going to save you. Same way. The trick is, he says, you need to see Belial. You need to see where the attack is coming from. You got to understand it. They are purposed to chase you around this world. Sometimes you'll want to stay by yourself. You'll find someone come and poke you. You're trying to keep the peace. Somebody comes and interfere. It's because they are programmed with a purpose to attack you. See it like how it is. I'm going to tell you a story about a man called Arbad Dwyer. He graduated with a degree in political science and accounting, master's degree in education. He coached football. This man chose a path to success. You know that word path? Very important. He became a senator for Pennsylvania State in the United States in 1971. When he became state treasurer in 1971 to 1981, there was public employees overpaid their insurance taxes. And so a firm had to be hired to do the calculation as to how much each employee must get back. And so there was a tender, no contest tender. And Dwyer was the man who gave a company, accounting firm, this tender. And it later came out through the employees of that accounting firm. One of them, who was a friend, Mr. Smith, he was a friend of Dwyer. And he gave a sworn affidavit to the FBI, and he swore in court that he paid Dwyer $300,000 kickback so that he can be awarded that contract. Dwyer was arrested, indicted, and was sentenced to serve a sentence in prison for about 12 years. Dwyer continued to claim his innocence. But just before his prison sentence can start, on the 22nd of January 1987, he was standing at a press conference and talking and handing out these checks to these employees. And at that conference, he took out a gun from a yellow envelope. He put it in his mouth, and a second later, he blew his head off. It was one of the first and only live suicide broadcasts. But I feel it a bit crude to put that up for you to watch. And the reason I'm sharing with you this was a Christian man. Later on, at the end of that year, same year, 1987, it was discovered that these people lied about him, and in fact he was innocent. And his name was cleared and his status was restored, but it was too late. His wife, his children, and his entire family were affected by this man's decision to shoot himself, claiming he was innocent right up till the last moment. Why am I telling you this? The path that people take for personal gratification, ambition, the path that these people take, if you take that path without God, Beliar can set you up and destroy you. That's his job. He will ruin you. When you go up anywhere, it's not that you won't be elevated. God will elevate you. But you got to take him with you. In fact, he's got to walk before you. In all your dealings, God must come first. Without God, nothing matters. Imagine the time this man took to sit and study all these degrees. The effort he put in a moment it was gone. Why? Because it's all vanity. Some of us put the same effort into our lives and we give our soul so little. We give God so leftovers. Let me tell you something. If you don't take God with you first, your journey is vain. You're in fact doing the bidding of Beliar. He controls your path if you're walking and Jesus is not in front. When Jesus is first, everything else will come after. I want to make sure that you understand. There came a time in Dwyer's life where Beliar said, I got him. He had no protection. He followed the path without God first. If you got God, nobody can be against you. So in your walk on this earth, consider making sure that your soul and its relationship with God takes priority over your studies, over your work, over anything else in your life. Otherwise, Beliar will also get you. I'm giving you that warning simply because I want to preserve your soul. Now, those of you that have realized, perhaps, that you have to put more dedicated effort in certain areas, I want you to raise your hands with me as we get ready to pray. Let us pray. There are many of you that want to rededicate your life, recommit your life. I want you to raise your hands now so that we can commit it together to God. Father, there's many of us that maybe we fall short, but that's okay because your blood has covered us. But Father, our intention is to be as close to you as possible. Let us draw us all closer to you, Lord, so that the events that will unfold in these last days, just like you protected Isaiah through the torment that Manasseh put him through, Father, you will preserve us in the same way. That no demon, no darkness, no Beliar will touch us. Cover every person that's raising their hands now with me in your blood and be their God. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Good afternoon or good morning, beloved. I'll see you again next week, but don't forget, we're taking communion, so join me next week. God bless you. Have a fantastic and blessed week. See you next week.